just add you as a contact, and I'm ready to go and all that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I don't know if I explained very well in my email what my angle is on my interviews. I'm just basically contacting people who I think are interesting and have led interesting lives and have had a unique experience on the planet.
Yeah.
And basically just discussing philosophy, your philosophy of the world, how you see the world and how you experience the world. So it's not necessarily about your musical career as much as you, the being that was a part of your experience.
Yeah, no, I that's why I was interested when Bill told me about it, that it sounded a chance. I mean, I've done about 10,000 interviews about music, and so
awesome.
A chance to widen upon that, why the music happened and why I do what I do, why I've done what I've done for such a long period of time, is that I welcome the opportunity. So thank you.
Awesome. Would you mind, just for composition, can you turn your screen just down a bit? Because your head's almost at the bottom of the half of the...
Yeah, it might be... Hold on one sec. I just got to loosen up. It's being held with tape, so we'll see what we do here. We just need to turn the screen towards me.
Yeah, just so your face is kind of in the middle to top half.
Yeah. Hold on, I think I got some help coming my way.
Sure.
So
sure. Yeah, no problem.
Oh, we just need to tilt it a bit this way.
Down or?
Like towards me. Yeah, like screen down.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Clay. Or that would work too.
That's perfect. Yeah.
I got my son has decided rather than releasing the tape, he's put a book under the. It's like propping up the Christmas tree, right? So if this works.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Clay.
Cool.
Okay.
So how I start the conversation is by a broader perspective, and just how would you describe the state of the world today? How you understand what's going on the planet?
Put it this way: when I started out in DOA in 77, 78, around there, I thought the world was a screwed up place. I realized after some time that the world was more screwed up than I thought. And now at this particular juncture, I think it's even 3 or 4 times more screwed up than it was back in 1978. I mean, there's horrible things going on that have happened before, and then they're repeating themselves. You know, in a way of like racism, sexism, greed, inequality, that kind of thing.
So what do you make of that? What do you make of that it's been in our consciousness? What's going on? It seems like anybody who's aware can see that we're headed towards self-destruction, right? I mean, why are the masses in your mind just oblivious to what's obvious to some? Yeah,
I think that I mean there are some positive things like the Me Too movement that's happened over the last 3-4 months or whatever. That I think that's a positive thing for helping women and helping people in general. I think that's a great thing. I think that people have to have something that can kind of wake them up and they can digest. Like it's almost like a single phrase type thing. And if you look at like unfortunately a guy like Donald Trump is the master of the single phrase thing that gets people turned towards him. And at least some of them in favor of what he's doing. The last one I can think was like a really good positive one until this Me Too thing has come along was the Occupy Wall Street. And I thought that was a great thing because people realized that the inequality that was going on, like how wealth was distributed. And I think even though people already knew, like, oh yeah, okay, my boss got way more than me, or the guy who owns General Motors has got like 10,000 times more than myself and my family. When you get like a single phrase, a movement type thing, like Occupy Wall Street or Occupy, which it morphed into, then people go like, oh, boy, I didn't think that 1% owned 90% of the wealth. Is that possible? Right? People were like going like, I can't believe this, but you have to come up with stuff like that, and it can quickly be washed away, unfortunately. Say Occupy, for example, the various camps that went on. I played music at about 3 different ones right when it's at its peak. It got morphed into something else because everybody else with other causes, and some of them like good causes, jumped onto the bandwagon because they're getting so much attention. Like, well, I want my I want my issue heard, right? So, and people are always looking for that opportunity. So people always sort of bandwagon, and that ended up kind of like taking apart Occupy, and it lost all steam.
Right. Well, isn't that what it always comes down to? Is that for the larger group of people, it comes down to their own personal reaction to something. In other words, the 1%, it makes people angry. I mean, I want mine kind of thing. I mean, isn't that what always gets in the way of actually true change? Is that everybody's just reacting to something?
Yeah, people have a tendency they get riled up and they react. I mean, the other thing that I'm really involved in is that I think is a bigger thing, and people have taken some steps towards it, is the environmental movement, right, or the green movement in a sense. And it's one of the few kind of pan movements, shall we say, that's across the earth that people understand when you say, I'm green. They understand, okay, yeah, you're for this, and this is, and generally people go, it's a good thing. And the only thing that really holds them back sometimes is the kind of economic argument. Oh, but what am I going to do for a job? That's always the counter to that, which is like, which there's lots of ways of arguing back at that, trying to explain to people that this is a good thing. So, yeah, of course, people always have self-interest in mind. That's been from day one, from our caveman days, right? So, but I think that when people do have enough smarts in this world, individually and collectively, that if you can get a movement going in the right direction, that they'll climb on board, at least for a while, long enough to make some positive changes, And obviously, it can go completely the opposite too, right? I mean, right now we're right in the state of where people kind of forget about Mussolini and Hitler. So then you have this state of fascism has come up again, personified by the prime ministers in Hungary, in Baltic states, in Poland is looking that way, and then of course a guy like Donald Trump, and then you have the leader of the Duterte, I think I'm mispronouncing his name, but the Philippines, right? They're using the strongman approach because people are afraid, in a sense, with this with the type of crap that they hear every night, or they get from their friends, or from the radio, from the newspaper, from the internet. A lot from the internet, obviously, because there's not much screening. It's just unfiltered in that sense. That people are starting to believe that crap. So now you have the ugly side of the human nature is really starting to come out again, like it hasn't done since 1933.
So, do you have a sense of a greater purpose for all this? Some people are in the middle of the story and they just see the conflict and they just are reactors and reactors. It seems to me that you're a big picture kind of guy. Do you also have a sense of that there is a greater purpose for the innate conflict that human beings feel? In other words, we individually, we all have our inner conflicts that we deal with all of our lives, right? I mean, it's just reflected out into the world, right? The more sane people that you've met treat the world sanely because they're sane first, right?
Yeah.
Do you have a sense that there is some kind of innate purpose for this conflict for the human being to evolve in any way, consciously or whatever way that you see it?
I don't know if there's if there's a purpose behind it. We've arrived to this point as a human race collectively. Over thousands and thousands of years evolved to this point, and now we're getting to the point where we're in the information age. I guess that's what you'd call it, and so it's easy to find stuff, but whether it be good or bad, I don't know if there's innate purpose behind that. I'm really kind of one of these people that believe that if you've got something wrong, and there's always going to be something wrong, you just have to keep fighting for it in that sense. And that's all you can do, because there's always going to be somebody who wants to take advantage of the situation or of a person monetarily, or lord it over them in some way or other. So that's kind of the path that I think we have to keep renewing ourselves and keep fighting. And I believe there is good in all of us, but sometimes at some point in their life that good has gotten covered up. And it's really hard to uncover. And with a lot of people, it may never be, right? So, but if we keep, if you can accentuate the positive and let people know, hey, there are good things. If we work together, we can achieve wonderful things for all people, not just for some people. But at the same time, we have to be like strong and ready to fight for what we believe in, right? So sometimes it does take an act of force. I mean, I usually believe that a lot of things can be changed by people collectively joining in. A lot of people don't realize actually how strong they are. So we usually think that, like in life, that the big government makes decisions, the big business makes all decisions, big media makes the decisions, right? But it really is all they are doing is poll reading and taking opinions and seeing how best to take advantage of the public, whether for power, pursuing power, or monetarily, or a combination of the two, right? Because money has no philosophy. Money is really the people the right-wing people that think that money is the only thing that matters. It's an easy philosophy because they only have one thing to believe in, and that's more money. So that makes all the people on the other side at a really real disadvantage because we all argue about, we need more of this, more of that, and there's like many different points of view. If you're like sort of like in a pro-people kind of, left type of nature, which I would call myself in that category. So I think but I said what I was getting back to is that people do have a chance to really change things if they realize the power that they have within themselves. And one really good example of that I saw, I took a tour of Prague in 1990, just after communism had fallen. And so the first day in Wenceslas Square, the big, giant, magnificent square in the middle of Prague, they wanted to get rid of the government. They had protests of 10,000 people. The police came out, smashed people. They had water cannons, all that kind of stuff. Next year, it's 20,000 people. And the police did the same thing. Then they finally ran somebody or killed somebody with one of the trucks with the water cannon. Within 5, it went up to 30,000, 40,000, 50,000. And within a week, there was 100,000 people there going like, wow. And then at that point, even the policemen who were the warders in that sense, because that's the job they're given, right, in that sense, they were going like, oh, I'm not with the government anymore. I'm with the people. They realized, oh, crap, we better get on board here type thing. And it was like within a week, the government that had been totalitarian government that had been, of course, propped up by the Soviet regime fell within a week after being there for 40 years. I'm sure people were going like, my God, why didn't we do this before? I mean, I know they tried in the Prague Spring in 1968, and the Soviets came in with tanks and all that. So not quite as simple as I'm saying, but the power that people have within themselves. I mean, and I think that's one thing in North America, like in Canada and States, that we don't use that power enough in a sense. We do have big protests, have the Million Man March on the mall in Washington and stuff like that. But if this was happening all over the place, then boy, the people in control would listen a lot more closely, I believe.
Yeah. Well, it's a funny thing because North America works well enough that everybody doesn't feel the oppression overtly, right? You know what I mean? The oppression isn't so obvious that, it doesn't, you understand.
Yeah, no, it's like we're doing pretty well here compared to the rest of the world. And probably a lot to do with the fact that it's spread out over a bigger area, where it's like in Europe, which is a good example. I think that you have a lot of built up resentments because they've had like hundreds and hundreds of years of war and conquest, and you stole my grandfather's bicycle, or this, in a mild example, the Dutch to the Germans, and then a much more drastic one like in the Baltic, right? Between Croatians and Serbians, for example, right? And those resentments go back hundreds of years, and that's a hard thing to settle. But I think in North America, we can be like a shining light or a beacon to the world. And I think if you think of the United States, this is one of the problems that an awful lot of Americans are having now, is that America was a beacon to the world. Now, with its current leader, it's like, wow, we don't welcome anybody. We don't want you. We don't want this. We want to be by ourselves. I mean, it's just like this sort of isolationism that Trump has spurred on. I mean, and it's not like he thought of this by himself. Like he is a master of seeing what people want and what will sell. I mean, he's made his living off selling things. And he saw that as like, I can sell myself right into the presidency by taking the lowest common denominator and the lowest bar, lowest of low that people can go, unfortunately.
What's funny was that it seemed like there was an option there in the States where you could have had a Bernie Sanders, which was the opposite direction of Trump.
Yeah.
That would have changed, it would have done drastic things in that direction, and it all went in the Trump direction. It's very interesting just to sit back and watch how it all unfolds.
Yeah, it was amazing. I was a big Bernie supporter, and I still am. I mean, he'd be pretty old if he tried to run for president next time, but, you still have a lot more sense than the guy in charge now, right? So, and unfortunately, the Clintons had already had their time, and they got the Democratic National Party to fix it so she would win, basically, and stole it from Bernie, who probably would have at least won one or two of those northern states in the Rust Belt states, and he would be president right now and doing some good people. He's talking about income equality, medical services for all, and just like kind of like logical things that everybody needs, right? And he was talking about $15 an hour. And $15 an hour, we're trying to get this in Vancouver, like in British Columbia, and we will pretty soon, I think. But still, you can't live off $15 an hour in Vancouver. You need more like $25 an hour. But you got to start somewhere.
I live in Richmond. I live in Vancouver too.
Oh, okay, all right, okay.
So
there you go. Then you know all.
I know.
Yes, I'm waiting for my ICBC rate increase and this increase. So
rent increase. Well, maybe you own your home, but I'm still a renter.
Right. Yeah.
So it seems like everything we've talked about, in a way, it all feeds from a source of conflict. Whether it's the changes in any changes seems for human nature seems to require some kind of conflict. I guess that's even true for us personally. We'll eat like crap until we get sick, right? We'll keep behaving a certain way until people start smacking us because of our behavior or something.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm asking is, well, I guess I've already asked this. It just seems to me that when I speak with everybody, the first thing that my first question to get the ball rolling is always, how do you see the world? And it always leads to the conflict.
Yeah.
So it seems to me that people need to have a new understanding of what conflict is in a certain way.
Yeah.
That it's an opportunity for awareness of whatever kind you want to make it, a personal awareness or an awareness of something is not working.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let me bring it to a personal thing.
Sure.
When you were younger, you were saying that you thought the world was all fucked up, and your reaction to it was energetic, and it was and you found your phrase that was very easy to remember. Talk minus action equals zero.
Yeah.
And that can be a mantra for anybody as a person, mm-hmm. right? From your individual.
No, it works. It works well on all sorts of levels.
And it's the hardest thing to put into practice, right?
Yeah,
whether it's a bad habit or anything, right? That's
true.
So how do you think? Then it comes to the question of, how does real change take place? And I think it comes into that phrase that you mentioned: talk has to equal action.
Yeah. Okay. Well, no, good point there, Randy. Randall. I think the thing is change. And this applies to when I was talking about a mass of people protesting, changing things. But change really starts. It has to start with yourself. You have to have a philosophy. Decide where you want to go in life. And this is, of course, much easier said than done. Depending on your economic circumstances, your personal, what's happening around with your family and friends. That's all significant. The biggest things in your world, right? That can change. You may have a close relative that's got a deadly illness or whatever, right? So this will totally throw you off. But this sort of self-awareness and being able to guide yourself and govern yourself, I think is really important. If you can just start to get a little bit of it, because if you don't have a philosophy, then you end up being like a leaf, and you're on the street, and the wind goes to the right, you go to the right. The wind goes to the left, you go to the left. It goes around, swirls around, you go around a circle and land in the gutter and get swept away. You know what I mean? This is so if you don't have an anchor and know where you're going, then you tend not to go where you want to go at all, except by mere circumstance, usually from like a friend or a relative or your significant other is like smarter than you and drags you along, which is also like a handy thing too, obviously, right? So, but I think if people can get grounded, and then this really involves a lot of it revolves around education, having the ability to do what you want to do, what you want to accomplish, and that education is one of the most important things. That's what I really believe. One of my mantras is that education should be free, like post-secondary. We shouldn't be paying for it, right? So it's why should advanced education, which pretty well everybody needs now to get ahead in this world, why should it be a privilege and not a right? We are a wealthy society. And if people are more educated, we will become a wealthier society. It's just simple. I mean, I happen to do something that I play guitar, sing, I write songs. I finished high school and I thought I was going to be a lawyer. I went to SFU for half a year, didn't do particularly well. I didn't become a lawyer. Then I heard about punk rock, and I just totally by accident fell into it. Right? I'm like, oh, well, that's pretty interesting. So I started a band. I mean, of course, we did a couple songs that were successful and tours, and then it took off. And here I am 40 years later, right? And so I started as a young man. Now I'm past being middle age, so where I'm at, like an older guy, right? So, but I got the philosophy as we're going along through, like, I mean, I took my dad's philosophy, like hard work. Like he was like one of these like grew up in the Depression, right? And then hard work was the only mantra that he understood. Right. So that obviously rubbed off on me, although not quite in the way that he expected, right? So I kind of just taken it and believed in the music, and I was lucky enough to meet a wonderful woman, my wife Laura, and we've been married for like 31 years and had 3 great kids. So that's kind of like, I consider myself pretty lucky. It just happened. But I mean, I did all that with only a high school education and just kind of learned. But I'm good at improvising, I suppose.
Well, that's why when you mention an education system, I mean, it seems like it is geared towards the serfs becoming employees of the, I mean, I've heard people say that the Buddhists were saying if they just put 15 minutes of meditation into school every day, just add that would change the world. I mean, I don't know, but I mean, the concept of balancing out a mental view of the world with something that's more internal and peaceful, or whatever that might be. It just seems that not only should maybe be free, but there should be more an expansion of what is options for different kinds of people. In other words, look where you went in your direction, right? You're obviously an intelligent guy, but school wasn't the right funnel for your intellect in a certain way, right? Because as soon as you heard music, that took you.
Yeah.
And that was the same for me. I was a musician too.
Okay. Yeah.
And I mean, it's just some people have a different bent towards what their bent is.
Yeah.
Geez, what was I going to ask you?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, my mind just went blank there.
Okay. Yeah, where were we? Just well, yeah. I mean, talking about the education and like how important it is, and everybody like expanding education,
right?
And making. I mean, that's one of the kind of I mean, old enough, and you probably remember this too, when they had some schools that were like alternate schools,
right?
For the that just couldn't go through regular high school. I managed to go through regular high school, right? I mean, as well as like playing music, I was really into lacrosse and hockey, so right. I kind of fit into that category a little bit. But when I got serious about music, I just stopped sports altogether, right? It just became like it vanished from my life in that sense, right? But if you have the education is more geared towards a wider variety of people. I mean, you got to take into the fact that boys learn at a different rate than girls. The different people. There's lots of immigrants in Vancouver, so that they need a lot of help. I mean, for a long time, I mean, our previous government in BC just got voted out. They cut funding for ESL, which doesn't make sense because I mean, you want immigrants to come in and build like a wealthy and healthy Canada. They need to know the main language of the country, which in this case, this area, it happens to be English, right? And it's a well-known fact that if your language of where you live is good, you move there, well-known fact that you're going to do better as a person and as a family rather than staying in like a small ethnic enclave.
Right. Well,
Nothing
actually,
wrong. Yeah, nothing wrong with being proud of your culture and
right.
participating in that. That's all like part of the kind of the cool thing that makes Canada like a really interesting, pretty unique place, like almost more than the United States because we kind of celebrate it and they don't, right? So this is like, even though we're pretty similar to them in a lot of ways, right? So
Right.
this is like ones that we've taken it, this multiculturalism
Yeah.
in a good direction.
Yeah.
You
There's
know?
not an innate us and them here. I don't
Yeah.
get an innate one. Now, of course, there's always going to be prejudices. You can be prejudiced in school if you have a big nose, let alone if you're from a different culture.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's always going to be that kind of thing. But there's not an innate us versus them here that I've ever seen.
No, and nor should there be. I mean, it's something that
Of
we have
course.
to guard against. It's like probably one of the great things about Canada, and why I think it's like the greatest country in the world. You know, I mean, well, New Zealand's pretty cool too, right? So, and a few other places, right? Is that there's a sense of trying to help people, help our fellow citizens. That's part of being a Canadian. And you don't, and sometimes you gotta grit your teeth because you're going like, I don't know if I really want to help this person. They have crossed me, or that I don't like their point of view. But you know what? Most Canadians, at least begrudgingly, if not willingly, will go like, yeah, they deserve our help. Right. So, and this is why we can't let people just live on the street. Homelessness is a big problem here in Vancouver. In Burnaby, we don't. We're the third biggest population-wise, third biggest city in BC. We don't have one homeless shelter, right? So that's another story. And then the whole thing with people dying through illicit drug use, whether they're chronic users or just occasional dabblers, right? And we've seen what's happened. 900 people a year the last few years through fentanyl and various associated things. That, I mean, we have to take drugs and treat it like a medical problem, not a criminal problem, right? You know, I'm not a big fan of Trudeau, but at least he's sort of getting part of that, going towards that. So I think that's what we have to do as a society. That, you know, as soon as you stop making a criminal offense, I mean, I was telling somebody the other day, we were in Frankfurt not too long ago, and our tour guide there said, you know, this was on a DOA band trip, but said, oh, somebody better stay with the van. It's a bit seedy area. And then we had parked right near the methadone clinic, right? And I looked around, and the German guy says, watch the van. It's very dangerous around here. And it's like, I go, wow, this is about 100th the size of Vancouver's danger zone, right? It's like, I think, you know, we did watch the van. We weren't stupid, right? But we're just going like, but in Germany, they were helping these people that through whatever cause, you know, personality, family, a lot of it has to do with how you're raised. In fact, most of it, you know, and how your parents or whoever raised you were. You know, a lot of people get into drugs through that, just as a lot of people end up in prison, you know, through having not a great family structure, you know. So, but have to find a way to help these people. It just makes sense with the homeless problem. I mean, you know, it's like if you gave homeless people all the services they needed, for example, like medical services, shelter, and access to doctors, employment training, whatever they might need, then the average person that would cost the BC government about 30 grand a year. As it is, the way people are on their own, sleeping on sidewalks or in tents or underneath freeways, that costs us more like about $57,000 a year. So we're actually, because we're not doing anything about it, we're wasting $27,000 per person that's on the street, and really not really giving them a proper chance to. You know what? Some people will never be rehabilitated, and they like living on the street. It's just one of those things. But there's an awful lot of people out there that, if it was done the right way, would take the help and would become, you know, valuable parts of our community.
Well, it's like what we were saying earlier. There's not enough people with a broader view, it seems. Everyone's got their own. It's just a very narrow view, and that's what I wanted to ask you about. I mean, you've had the unique opportunity to kind of gauge crowds over 40 years or whatever it's been. The level of desperation, if you will call it that, or of it seems like these are much more intense times than 30, 40 years ago.
I would agree totally.
The pressures are coming from everywhere, economically, environmentally, socially, politically, right? There's pressures everywhere on people. How have you seen it all kind of how have you felt it all develop? I mean, if you personally, as well as how you've seen people, because it seems like you're quite at ease with yourself.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, yeah, I feel good about what I've done in my life, and I have a great family and great support system here, and so that's all going very well. And I love playing music, and I've been dabbling in politics and stuff like that. And I haven't been elected yet. The people have spoken, but you never know. That may happen, right? One of these days, it may not, right? So, I I think that the way things have changed over the years. I mean, you know, okay, this is the third time I bought it, but Trump, it really reminds me of what's happening now. Like, things are like pretty similar in a lot of ways. Trump really reminds me. There's more pressure, yeah, and there's more information, and things are tougher because people know more, and there's more people. The environment is more degraded. Economically, it's harder. But say a guy like Trump, it really reminds me of Richard Nixon. Remember Richard Nixon in 1970? I was still in high school, but he was like denying that any of this stuff happened or it was involved in this. And one by one, the pieces came out, and like he had done everything they had, the Washington Post had accused him of, right? So this is kind of like, so politically, we're in a worse position because of let's just say, even though like the major network news like ABC and CBS and NBC were in the United States I wouldn't call them particularly fair and open-minded, but they had a lot fairer sense of what's going on with reporting news than we have now. So I think, like I said, the age of information, the internet age is a great thing, but we are like there's just too many lies, and it's like you talk about false news. It's like the president of the United States is the number one perpetrator of false news. He says he's the victim of it, but he's the guy who's doling out the biggest piles of horseshit that you've ever seen, right? It's just like, you just said that, now you said this. And then, but going to say, and over to economics, I think that is harder. Like I was talking to some friends here today that somehow back in the 70s or 80s, it always seemed like it was a little bit easier to get by. Especially when you think about here or like Toronto, with housing prices, with you're paying, for your insurance, your medical costs, whatever comes across the board, food, everything is more expensive. The bakeries and grocery stores colluding to keep the price of a loaf of bread $1.50 higher per loaf for 15 years, and then getting away with off the hook by paying everybody $25. It seems to me that's about 16 loaves of bread or 17 loaves of bread, if my math is off. I've eaten a lot more than 17 loaves of bread over the last 16 years. I want payment for 1,000 loaves of bread. I happen to like bread and peanut butter. I mean, ripped off by all these guys that all these grocery stores and Western Bakery and stuff like that. So I think people got to realize, that if we get conned so easily, if you allow yourself to be conned, you will get ripped off, and that's what's happening now economically. And even though there should be more things in place, we should learn more lessons. As soon as the lessons are learned, somebody who wants something that doesn't belong to them or wants more money or whatever, they come up with a better way to cheat the system, right? So they're caught, and they have their friends in government or in the media that help them with this, right? So,
the one positive thing that I see about the whole Trump thing is that he represents a shift in what's possible now. I mean, it went in that direction instead of Bernie Sanders' direction.
Yeah.
But I mean, now it's like everything's out in the open. Lies, truths, everything is like looked at. Like you said in previous years, with standard institutions, everything was kind of hidden, right? It took an underground.
Watergate took ages to get out, right? It took 6 months, right?
And it took an underground for that was what punk was based on, the underground knowledge that everything is full of shit, right? Yeah. And now everything's out in the open that it's full of shit. Everybody's talking about it. So I guess that's one positive thing that it represents. If you step back and just don't judge it as being, it's too bad that he won instead of Bernie Sanders, but that the fact that it represents that more is possible now. Mm-hmm. And usually things kind of teeter-totter, right? They go from one extreme to the other. Yeah. So hopefully that represents the next.
I hope we're at a low ebb. I mean, it's hard to say with you got. I mean, boy, oh boy. I mean, sweep out all the old, get rid of all the old guys. I mean, it's been like way too much, too many years, like old white guys running everything. Now, it doesn't make like young people of different races or like a male or a female make them any smarter than old white guys, but they kind of had their turn. So maybe somebody's going to come along that can really shake things up, right? They haven't appeared yet, if you ask me, on either our political scene or on the American political scene. And one thing I was really impressed with that just like I said, slogans do a lot and make people think, like, because they're easy to remember. I mean, like, we're in the middle of recording a DOA album. It's going to be out in May, so I can't tell you the title yet. I finally came up with it, but I probably went through 100 because you want to say something short that gets the idea of what you're saying, right? But one of my favorite things, and I'm not stealing this title for the album or anything like that. One of my favorite things I heard most recently was in the last British election, where the Labour Party versus the Tories, and the Labour's motto was "for the many, not the few." And I'm like, that is brilliant. That says everything you need to know right there. And Jeremy Corbyn didn't win, but he looked like he was going to get wiped out, and they came up with substantially that they might win the next time round, right? So what if Theresa May like teeters and totters and crashes out or whatever, this whole Brexit thing screws up with England, which it probably will, right? But it's just like you have to find ways to enable people to get them looking forward that, I believe we can make a change, right? So like you're saying that because like Trump has taken us to a new low, got like real estate mogul, reality TV star, who's good in front of the camera, obviously, a lot of practice, right? Grew up in the public spotlight. He's taken us to a new low, but it's opened up a door that somebody else could come in and take us to a new high. I hope you're right about that.
Well, you were mentioning it earlier about Trudeau, and one thing I really admired about Trudeau is that was exactly what he did with his cabinet, right? It was 50% women. It was every ethnic, covered pretty much. It set a precedent for the concept that you're talking about.
Yeah, I thought that was great, and they said why half female cabinet? He went because it's 2015. I thought it was like. No, I know they probably practiced that line for a while.
Sure, slogans, right?
Yeah, but it's like slogans work, right? And people remember it. Everyone went like, oh, well, that was really smart, And it did make it possible, and you need gender equality in this society, right? It's like guys aren't any smarter than women, and vice versa. So why not use more women's ideas? Because we've had guys' ideas forever, and where have we got to? And
really, in your personal life, doesn't the woman in your life or the female aspect of your life just make it so much more better? Just as I'm sure you make hers better. To have that reflected in our society and politics, I'm sure, which couldn't be anything but better, right?
Yeah, it's going to be improvement. I totally agree. It's been improvement, a vast improvement for me, and would be an improvement for society taking that point of view. Absolutely.
So do you when you think of the future, I mean, I don't know, do you have grandkids yet?
I got one grandkid. My daughter Georgia had a little baby boy a year ago. His name is Liam. Yeah, so I've got one, hoping for more.
How do you feel about the future when you? I guess do you have dueling ideas of doom and gloom and positivity, or how do you feel?
It's like I think I said this earlier that you just have to keep fighting, right? Because if you want a positive future, you have to keep asserting it, because all sorts of people and forces out there that will try and make it not so positive because it's not in their interest. So I think that's really important, that you have to train people, not trains your own, where you have to, it's like thinking if you have like a good idea, let people know about it. And good ideas catch on. Like I said, the whole thing is change starts locally. Good positive things start locally. And if there are good things they can install towards the future or help make a greater future, then you got to start right in your own little community, right? Whether it's like in Richmond or in Burnaby or wherever, or even smaller than that. And if you do have a good idea, tell your neighbors, tell your friends, tell your relatives, And if it is a good idea, they'll catch on and go like, oh, well, that makes sense. And as I say, this is because I say it really goes back to, I say, with the opposite of like change coming from big business, media, and government. It can come from people if we take the initiative. We can make a positive future, but we have to keep fighting towards that. And when I say fighting, I mean peaceful change, right? Because this is one of the great things about Canada, that we do have one of the most civil countries in the world, where when people do disagree, we don't get a gun, or we don't burn their place of worship or whatever. I mean, of course we have a few psychotics that have done that, sadly, over the last, well, forever, off and on, right? But it's a more isolated incidents than most places in the world, fortunately.
Right. I guess one of the things that you mentioned earlier as well about North America being a little bit behind the rest of the world, and I think it's in a sense of community that you're talking about, because we all have our own houses. I have a friend who's Russian, and he's quite wealthy. He's in the real estate here, but he owns an apartment still. And I said, why don't you get a house? You can have land. And he says they're not used to that there. They're used to living kind of on top of each other. They have a sense of community more, whereas we kind of build our own little bubbles here, right, in our yards.
Yeah. Well, I think that's going to change. I mean, we do have the most space in the world per capita, obviously, right? Although what a lot of people don't realize, well, a lot of Canadians do, but maybe people on the outside don't do that. We also end up using the most heat in the world, because we're like, besides Russia, the coldest place in the world, right? So it's once you get outside of Vancouver, Victoria, it can become very uninhabitable during the winter time, right? So. The change that's happening around Greater Vancouver. I mean, it's you can see it. The city's going upwards, as opposed to being spreading out. So that's good in some senses. I mean, there's a lot of things. The housing thing. I think one of the things I think is important, rather than building all like skyscrapers, for example, here, like whether it's in Richmond, Burnaby, Coquitlam, Vancouver, North Van. I think people lose a sense of community when you live in a high-rise tower, because you don't know anybody. But when you live in a walk-up, not necessarily walk-up, can have elevator, but like a 4 to 6 story apartment building, you kind of get to know everybody in the lobby, and you go like, oh yeah, now Mrs. Jones's cat is gone. We got to go look for it, or we got to help. We got to help this old lady with the groceries up to the next floor, because she's old and she deserves some help, right? So I think that more of that kind of stuff in Greater Vancouver would be a better future than what they're doing in my town, where we have more high-rise towers going up in more high-rise development going up in Burnaby than all the rest of Metro combined. So, we are the flow-through community, and we've got all SkyTrain stops and stuff like that, and we have the 4 town centers. They're building these places up like that. But I don't think you build a sense of community with that, right? And what you do is you overburden the schools, the fire department, the parks. So you got to develop this all the time, so you still do have a sense of community for those people. It's like, the single-family home. I live in one. I love it. But you know what? We don't have enough space or enough money to have that for everybody, right? So obviously I'm in a lucky position to be in that situation.
So how have your goals evolved from being a young man to being an experienced older person? How's your goals, like personal goals, changed? Not necessarily musically, but just
Yeah. Well, one thing I'm really much more conscious of than when I was 20, now that I'm 61, is my health. Yeah. When you're 20 years old, you can do anything. You just say whatever, it doesn't matter. Now I'm really, I have been for like 30 years really conscious of exercising and trying to stay in reasonable physical fitness. And the other thing is keeping mentally open to new ideas is like a really super important thing for people when they get older. Because if you travel in the same circles and talk to the same people all the time, and take in no new ideas, your world will tend to end up being a little bit smaller as years go by. And we know that really tends to make people more conservative and less open to change. Even though, like, when that's like older people always have a really hard time, like, I can't believe back in my day, we didn't do things like that. Well, yeah, but it's not back in that day anymore. It's like 40, 50 years later, right? So, I mean, we always make a joke, like, talk about, like, oh, the 90s. Yeah, back in the 90s, that was like 15 years ago, wasn't it? And the 80s, that was only 20 years ago, I think. Like, we kind of joke around like that, just like, of course, no, the 80s were like almost like 40 years ago or whatever. Yeah. So that's like a long time. And the world's gone almost upside down in that period of time, right? So you got to be ready to roll with the punches, right? That's kind of been my philosophy all along, that you better be able to figure out how to adapt, and not just adapt to survive, but adapt to be happy as you survive in this world. And it's not an easy thing sometimes.
Well, you still got your hair. You don't look like you need glasses. You're doing pretty good.
Yeah, no, I'm doing okay. Thank you. Yeah, it's just I consider myself one of the luckiest people in the world. All right, so.
So do you have a spiritual? Spiritual is a funny word. I don't necessarily mean religious. I don't mean God. I mean whatever you could term that.
Yeah, I don't believe in God, but I totally respect people's right to believe in that, worship and all that. I mean, it's just like that's how people grew up and it took that in. Myself, it's just really just you got to have a self belief, as I said before, and that's really. And I understand spirituality. I don't believe in a greater being or anything like that. So I think most of the stuff you got to control if you can with yourself, your friends, your family, and just work on it from there, right? So and I don't believe you're going to go to any great heaven or hell or anything like that. I just don't believe in that existence of that. So, what do you do in this world? So to say that I don't believe in karma. Like, if I went, I wouldn't. But if I went and took somebody's money, for example, right? Well, then that karma is going to come back and get me. Somebody's going to take my money. No, I don't believe that. But what I believe is that if you treat people with respect and help them, you know what? That makes other people treat people with respect, and eventually that help is going to work its way back to you, right? So it goes in a circle. Pay it forward, I suppose, in that sense, right? Yeah.
Well, that to me is spirituality.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah, I mean that's
my interpretation.
About conducting yourself as a good person.
Right.
Right.
And that's why I contacted you. Is because you've been an active force in the world, and every time I've ever seen an interview with you, you have that openness that you're talking about.
Right. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean that's important. I mean, like sometimes I gotta fight it. I get older, I get a little bit more conservative, right? So, but then and I catch myself sometimes going like, no, I wouldn't have said that 20 years ago, right? But then it's like you guys keep, I mean, I don't find there's good new music going on, but most part I listen to my old favorites, right? Whether be like old the Clash or Black Sabbath or Willie Nelson or whatever. Those are three of my favorite things. CCR, and I'll go back and I might read new books, but I'll probably go back and pick up a Hemingway or a Steinbeck. It's pretty hard to beat those books, so. But you got to be open. I mean, really, because people just come up with stuff, the craziest things that you never thought of, and then you realize, oh yeah. But when I was 20 years old, and I told my parents I was in a punk rock band, or I was on the front of the Georgia Strait, wearing a leather jacket, and people were going like, "Joey, shithead," Then people were outraged, and but that's how we made a name, and that's how we tried to affect some change. And it was. Not totally successful, but at least partly successful.
Well, I saw you open for the Clash way back at the Forum, I think.
Right, yeah.
Right, and I was in an alternative band back in the days, and
what was it?
Pardon me.
What was the name of the band?
Damien was the name of our band. It was a kind of alternative rock band.
Okay, right.
But your music was an influence on me. particularly, you know, the World War III, that tight driving layered texture, tight texture. You know, that era was very influential on my music at the time.
Yeah, we still play that song. We still play a bunch of the old songs, and it's pretty fun. As I say, we're working on a new album now. We got about 16 new songs. They won't all go on the album, but probably 13 or 14, and it'll be out in May. And so, no, we have really fun. I have a couple of really good guys, a really good rhythm section now. And I mean, of course, I have had before too. Obviously, like Chuck and Randy or Wimpy and John Card and all that were incredible. But we're doing well. We're going well. You know, playing like 70, 80 shows a year type thing. So, yeah, busy. We went to China for the third time in September. That's a mind-blowing experience, right? And you got to be prepared.
How does it go over there?
You ready to adapt to change or doing things differently than back home. You're just like, whoa, it's just like, it's opposite in a lot of ways. It's pretty cool, though. What's
the reaction there to your music?
We went in 2009, and maybe a few people knew songs, but I mean, it's kind of one of those things, like, like you haven't been in a band. You know, when you play in front of an audience and they don't know your songs, you got to try harder. Like, it's like, wow, this isn't going over. Like, we better step it up a notch here, right? Before they start chucking stuff at us, right? Bottles or whatever, right? So that was like in 2009, and then by 2014, went the second time, then people started knowing some of the songs. And good opening bands too, like really great punk rock bands there, right? Not everyone, but I've seen like a half dozen like excellent bands there. And in this past year in 2017, reaction was really good. A little record company put out a single of ours. People knew the songs. So there's a big underground there, right? I mean, it's like you can't find anything out about the outside world. Like you try and go on the internet, as soon as you go onto a site that they think it's got some sort of content, it closes down.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so, like, I mean, even like something like as innocuous that got ESPN. I was following the baseball playoffs. I am a New York Yankees fan, and they're doing pretty well. So ESPN was shut down because I guess at some point or they had some sort of political comment on it. Seems to me it's only a sports network, right? So then I would go like, okay, I'll find all what happened when I get home type. It was one of those things, right? So, anyways, yeah, it was great though. And we went to Thailand and Taiwan. Taiwan was really, really fun. We called it China Light because it wasn't as crowded, it wasn't as dirty, and it wasn't as hectic. But it was pretty cool. Taiwan was really nice.
Was it more open?
What's that?
Was it more open?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Totally. And there's like it was pretty easy too. Like there's because tons of Canadians there, obviously. Like a lot of people moved there to teach school and they teach English and just stayed, got married and stuff like that. And the one place that's really interesting, I had no idea, was Malaysia. Malaysia was like really, really modern. They had same SkyTrain system we do, made by Bombardier. So the bells were the same when we got the SkyTrain and went all over the place. And it's like, wow, this is like strangely like home, but not like home. And then when we did the show with this is singularly one of the weirdest things of the trip. We played in like in a punk rock squat. About 200 kids showed up, like old school, like everything barely working. It was like filthy beyond belief. And it was also like one of the greatest shows you could ever play type thing. And we played, and then some guy yells at the encore, I play the hockey song, like Stompin' Tom Connors. They're going like, in Malaysia? This doesn't make any sense, right? So I knew how to play it, and the other guys kind of knew how to play it. So we started playing it. The crowd went nuts. About 3 or 4 guys were like crowd surfing as we were playing this. So we're going like, okay, there's something wrong with this picture, but somehow it worked. It's like, it was, I think it was more, the song was the right pace of punk rock that they liked it, so.
Right. Well, that must be an amazing feeling to feel your connections extend throughout the whole world. Do you know what I mean?
We have done really well that DOA won't, we played a lot of big festivals in Europe lately, and we'd always do really well at that. And then you play them on the weekends in the summertime, and then club shows like during the week. But I think that DOA could go anywhere, and we're not going to fill like a stadium or even a hockey rink or anything like that, but we're going to get a decent crowd anywhere we go. So it's like, yeah, I guess it's paid off in that sense, right? So it's done well, right? So.
Did you expect that it would ever be a mass appeal, what you were doing?
I think when you're younger, you always think that you might have a chance of being really big. It's like, okay, we're gonna play the Coliseum or something like that, or the AC Center in Toronto, or whatever. It's like, but show business is and I call it show business because that's what it is. I mean, that's not totally what I do, obviously, right? But show business and music business is a really cool business. It's not necessarily fair, but you know what? Nobody ever said it was fair, right? So you just get into it, right? It's like, but I think I did better at doing this than if I had become a lawyer. Right. So at least I have a good buddy who's a lawyer, and I said, I almost became a lawyer instead of being a musician. He says, well, I wish I had become a musician instead of a lawyer. I went, oh, okay. Hey, Randall, I better go. I got to get to this.
Do you have just 2 minutes just for one last question?
Sure.
I have this thing where I ask just people if you could make a message or just say something and you're speaking to all of humanity. Like, yeah, I know.
Okay, sure.
What would you say to people? What would you say to people?
You know what I'd say? What I'd say to anybody was that the biggest thing you can do is like try and take control of your life. It affects some positive change in this world, and you'll make yourself happier, and you'll make those around you happier. And basically, what sums up or boils down to talk minus action equals zero.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to speak with you.
And send me the link when it's up, and
sure.
We'll put it on the Sudden Death website. That's really cool.
For sure. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I have one question for you.
Sure.
Yeah, so you interviewed Noam Chomsky?
Yes. A couple times, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's it. When I saw that on your thing, like I recognized a bunch of other people. When I saw Noam Chomsky, I went like, well, it's good enough for Noam. It's good enough for me.
And Andrew Weaver. I interviewed Andrew Weaver, too.
Okay, yeah, no, Andrew's a great guy.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, I really, really like him. I think he's doing a good job in the legislature, right?
He's a real genuine.
But I was really impressed with Noam Chomsky. We opened for him once on the beach, Sunset Beach. 20,000 people there to hear Noam Chomsky, and then somebody got the bright idea. I think it was my brother. He was involved stopwar.ca, and so it's like 12 years ago. We go, well, why don't we get DOA to warm up for Noam Chomsky? So I said, sure, that'd be great. So we're super loud and brash, and then Noam Chomsky comes on. Of course, he's older and frail. Yeah. So it's just 20,000 people lean towards the speaker system. They're like, whereas, is that probably someone when we were playing, they're going like, it was the opposite, right?
They couldn't hear anymore, that's why. Yeah, he was
awesome.
Take care. Awesome, genuine guy. But thank you so much.
Okay, you take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.